want to remind you,
There we go.
okay, you started recording. Good. Excellent. Okay.
So
Well, I think I met everybody last week. Anybody did? I didn't. Yeah. Okay. Yes. We have some of the same folks. Great.
Oh,
All right.
me. I
yeah, I think
haven't
Lydia
muted.
was not here
Yeah.
last week.
Ah, Lydia wasn't here. Okay. Very good.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so we have some more questions for you today.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of today is going to focus on your experience kind of from during when Stonewall riots happened and through, the AIDS plague and different kind of topics surrounding that,
Yeah.
and also tying in Shar Zahav.
Are you guys
Yeah, we're
recording?
recording. Yeah.
Okay, I'll get out of here.
And then we're also, I believe Lydia is going to be timekeeping, so we're going to try and have each Q&A around 6 minutes, and then she'll send a chat or do a emoji in her video of a minute warning.
Good. Great.
Yeah. So if
Okay.
you're ready, then we are good to go.
Yeah. And this week, I hope that everybody will ask a question or two. Is that how you have it arranged? Spread them
Yes.
around. Great. Wonderful. Okay.
All right. So our first question, we wanted to know some of your thoughts on feminism and how feminism shaped and influenced your identity.
Well, I have to say that I learned a great deal about it from Shahar Zahav, from our synagogue, uh, because we were sort of struggling with it in the early years of the synagogue. The synagogue was founded by three gay men, but women came right away and were always welcome. But at some point there was actually a split between the men and the women, and it had to do over a male rabbi that we wanted to hire, who the women were uncomfortable with, and felt that he was not sensitive to them, and so this really upped the ante about feminism in the synagogue, and so I learned a great deal about it. I knew about feminism, and it was always something that I supported, but it took on new, really new importance from that experience. The women did come back eventually, but and then and as you've seen with our prayer book, everything is degenderized. It's always been that way from the very beginning, uh, or gender neutral, and so and that was that thing that the LGBTQ synagogues began. We started that. Now every synagogue does that. Every reform and conservative, every liberal synagogue, I think in the world, certainly in America, has prayer books that are degenderized, meaning that we don't call God by he or Lord, and other other pronouns as well. Um, and so that's a great contribution that we made, and I'm proud of that. And beyond that, personally, I don't know. I mean, it's something that's always been there. I support it. That I've always felt comfortable with that. I don't know what more to say really about it. Yeah, but I'll entertain a question if anybody
Do you
wants to
feel
clarify.
like feminism was sort of like the intersectionality where maybe feminism also helped in your LGBTQ identity or your Jewish identity, other than like Shahar Zahav, like is something that, allowed you to be a certain way, or members of the communities that you're a part of, um, that feminist workers or feminist ideas kind of helped that happen?
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose so. The ideals, the values of feminism are very strong in the LGBTQ community in general, which is a very political community, tends to be. And so, this is to the extent that feminism was or is a kind of a political movement. It was always very strong in every organization that I was involved in, and friends and so on and so forth. So it's been a important theme, in my life and in my gay life. And I will say that perhaps if I were not gay, it might not be as strong an influence because it is such a strong thrust in the LGBTQ community. If I wasn't gay, maybe I wouldn't have, learned as much about it and had all those experiences and so on. Uh, but so yeah, I think that's what I would say about it. Uh, Also, I think, well, I'd add this, when I was younger, I'm 77. So when I was younger and growing up in the 50s and so on, there was no such thing. The concept hadn't really been uh, um, uh, created yet, if you will. I don't know when that actually started. Of course, there was women's suffrage, getting the vote for women and all that happened in the early 20th century. But I don't know exactly when feminism started, but probably somewhere in the late 50s, early 60s, and then it grew from there. So, so unlike your generation, where it's always been there. It's something that wasn't always there for me.
Yeah, I think we can move on to the next question.
All
Thank you
right.
for that.
Good. Yeah.
Could you tell us now some of your highlights as a Jewish LGBTQ identified person that took place for you from the time of the Stonewall riot in 1968 until the onset in your awareness of HIV and AIDS?
Mm. Well, interesting. I think I mentioned to you last week that I lived in Israel for a year, and Stonewall was 1969, I believe, June 69, if I'm not incorrect, and that was the year I was in Israel. So I really knew nothing about it until I got back. It wasn't, I guess it was carried in the New York Times and so on, and maybe small articles in local papers, but it wasn't a big thing. It was, it wasn't the significance of it was not apparent right away. Although the next year in San Francisco, we started having a gay parade and a gay, what we used to call Gay Freedom Day. So the first one was 1970, the year after Stonewall, and it went on, from there. And of course, now it's a huge event, which before the pandemic, we were getting, I don't know, probably more than 1 million people at the parade, which is pretty amazing. But in any event, so uh, in the beginning, Stonewall didn't mean anything to me, but gosh, to focus on that period before HIV/AIDS, I have to say that the 70s in my life, and I think also in general, were kind of the golden age of the pre-AIDS era, if you will. It seemed the time when things kind of came together. More people came out. There were people like Harvey Milk who told everybody, you must come out. You must let your friends and your neighbors and your family know who you are if you want to be accepted. And that began to take hold. And it seemed to me that San Francisco was just like glowing with a gay spirit. Like everything that was exciting and interesting and good had gay people involved in it. It was almost like you couldn't do it without the gays, It was and of course the stereotypes about being good at design and all those sorts of things were part of that. But it really seemed to me like the 70s, it was just this golden era. And along with that came a lot of free sex. Sex got somehow associated with gay liberation. That that you had to. The part of it was that it was permissible to have a lot of sex, and so when AIDS came along, that was a very difficult adjustment for people to give up some of that and still feel that they had this the spirit of liberation. And you have to understand what that meant for people, that had lived their lives, fairly closeted and so on, and now felt comfortable just being out there and being gay and marching in the parade and doing gay things, et cetera, et cetera. So and you know and the discos. I mean, all the great disco divas and songs from the '70s. You know, some of which, a lot of which are still being played today. You know, but they become classics. So you know, when AIDS happened, uh, it was a real come down. It was really, I mean, it was a tragedy, of course, and we'll talk about that probably in our next question. But it was just a rude awakening. You know, I think it's hard to if you, to understand what it meant for some people to be out and to embrace, to live their lifestyle, to live their natural, you know, life as an LGBTQ person. You know, imagine that you came from a very conservative town, let's say in the Midwest of America, where you could not be out, and where you know there was a lot of hatred of gays and so on. And maybe you're a school teacher there, and or you know, or maybe you're a teenager, and you know maybe your parents kick you out of the house because you're gay, you know, and you come to San Francisco and you start a new life. And there's so many people like this. They get kicked out of their families. They came to San Francisco as a kid, as a teenager, or as a young 20 something, and started a whole new life. And hard to understand what it meant to those people, how important that was, and what a turn it was for them. So Cleve Jones is a wonderful example. I don't know if you know who Cleve Jones is. He's the one who started the AIDS quilt, which you've seen, and I hope, and was also a very, very political person. He came as a kid, and he was, you know, on Polk Street looking for his next meal, you know, and he ended up being a wonderful political leader of the gay community. So, questions of clarification from you guys?
Yeah, I think that brings us to our next question, which is how did the AIDS plague impact you?
Well, I think the main thing we could say about that is that anybody who was involved in the heavily in the gay community with a lot of friends, etc., like myself, we lost a lot of friends. We lost a lot of people. It was it was very it was a very, very difficult time. Um, you know, to give you an example, I mean, the Castro district where I live is a wonderful, you know, really vibrant gay community, and it felt like a small town. It didn't feel like you're being in the city. You'd walk down the street and you'd see friends, and you would chit chat, and it was kind of like a village, and because you knew people. And during AIDS, you know, you'd stop and talk to people like just like you normally would, and then maybe a few months later, 6 months later, you might run into that same person, and they were walking with a cane, and they looked very fragile. And maybe a few months later, you ran into another friend, and they say, "Oh, did you hear about so and so? He died." And in the early days of AIDS, everybody died. Nobody survived. There was no treatment. There was no cure. There still is no cure, but there are treatments at least, and prophylactic and so on. But in the early days, everybody died. So it was a very, very sad time. You know, we had memorial services in the synagogue all the time for people. And but the community, the good part of it, if you can say there's a good part to all that, or the silver lining, was that it brought people together, and that was what was very important to me, and I think to others in the synagogue. You know, we formed caregiving groups, for example. If a friend was sick, his friends would get together and make up a schedule. You know, well, I'm going to bring him a meal every Tuesday night, right? Or I'm going to go shopping for him, you know, on Saturdays, or you know, marketing, or whatever it was, to take care of our friends. So these circles of caregivers arose, and they were very powerful. Also, there were a lot of organizations that grew up around AIDS support, information, and support. There was and there still is an organization called Shanti Project. I was a volunteer for that. I was trained as a volunteer. People felt myself and others felt very helpless in the situation. You wanted to do something. And so that's why a lot of people got involved in different volunteer activities to be able to engage and to try to do something, because we all felt very helpless in the situation. In the beginning, don't forget, no, we didn't really know what caused AIDS, and we didn't know if it was contagious, or if you could catch it by touching someone or sharing food, or we just didn't know. But in any event, Ashanti Project trained volunteers to be emotional support volunteers and also practical support. So practical support, you would help clean the house or go shopping or take them on an errand or whatever they needed. Emotional support was get together with the client, the person with AIDS, and just listen, talk, listen to what they have to say, and just support them emotionally as you could. So I did that, and that was something that I felt like I was at least doing something, because we did feel helpless. The other thing that was very important during the AIDS epidemic was that the women and the men started to come together. Prior to that, lesbians and gay men, they really weren't that interested in each other, right? The women are interested in other women, the men are interested in other men, so they really don't have much in common. They're both gay, but they don't have that much in common. But during AIDS, the women started to support their gay brothers, their friends, in all kinds of ways. And one of the big ways was donating blood, because it was badly needed, and they would not let gay men donate blood because they had no way to test the blood to see if it was HIV free. So the women stepped up and started having blood drives. We did a lot of them at the temple, and it was really a wonderful thing because it brought people together. And I see amongst my friends a lot of friendships now between gay men and gay women, lesbians, which didn't exist before. So that was, we all kind of had a common cause, I think, at that point. And that was very important. What else can I tell you about that? That also, I think that the men and the women coming together sowed the seeds of the gay political movement that was to come, that was to grow, because we realized that we could do a lot more together than separately. And so, we came together around AIDS, and then we realized that, and so then we went on politically and fought for more equality and discrimination, anti-discrimination bills, and then eventually marriage and the right to marry and so on, and all the different political movements that keep going on. They're all really cohabitated, if you will, by men and women, and that never happened before Stonewall. I won't say never happened, but rarely happened before Stonewall. So that was a big change, and as I say, brought on by the HIV/AIDS. So.
Thank you. Our next question actually was pretty similar to what you were just talking about. So I'm just wondering if you have any more important memories, experiences, or life lessons that took place between the 1980s till the early years of the 21st century.
Even to the beginnings of AIDS, you mean HIV?
Yes.
Yeah. Memories? Is that basically the question? Yeah.
Yeah, just like memories or like life lessons or experiences that you've had.
Yeah. Well, as I said, it really was the golden age, I think, of gay liberation, and it just seemed like everything was, was getting stronger and stronger and better, and there was more gay presence and more coming out and a bigger community, and it just seemed like everything, was happening. And then of course AIDS put the brakes on that. The priorities changed. But during that time, gosh, I have such really wonderful memories of doing things with friends. I'll give you an example. There was a resort up in Russian River, which is a resort community, about an hour and a half north of San Francisco, with a warm climate, so people like to go there in the summer. And the town of Guerneville has had a lot of gay resorts, and they still have a few, but basically resorts where particularly gay men and some women would go, and you'd go to the place. It would pretty much be all gay, and so we used to go up to Fifes, which was a beautiful, beautiful property up in Guerneville, and we'd go camping. My friend Neil and I, and pretty much everybody there for the weekend, for the holiday weekend, would be gay, and they had a disco at night and so on. And the campground was wonderful, because on the holidays, people would decorate their campsites, and there was a competition, and there'd be like groups of tents, and the one that we always thought was so funny was they made a banner and said Camp Sissy, and that was the name of their camp. And I can say people would decorate with all this stuff, and it was just such a fun time, and it was just all about the fun of being gay and doing this stuff, that people, other gay folks could remember, could appreciate. One weekend I remember, I don't know if it was Camp Sissy or another group, but they put on a talent show, and they had this guy in drag, and she was Vanna White from Wheel of Fortune. I don't know if some of you who don't live in America may not know Wheel of Fortune, but it's a very popular game show on TV. And Vanna White is the one who, never gets to say anything. She just turns around the letters. So this guy was playing Vanna White, and for years afterwards, whenever I saw him in the Castro, I'd say, "Hi, Vanna," So those are the kind of things. We just had a lot of fun. It was really a fun time, and along with that, there was a certain amount of free sex and all that, which people were into. Not everybody. I wasn't so much into that, but some people were, and but it was a very fun time, and I felt like you come into this amazing world. This amazing world of friends and of people that and when you're around other gay people, I mean, obviously you go to a resort, you don't know everybody, but it just felt comfortable being with them, because you knew that that they were also gay, and there was something in that. It was sort of a brotherhood, a sisterhood, if you will. So it when I say it's the golden, when I say it was the golden age, it really was the golden age. I think the 70s, well, basically the 70s, not so much in the 60s, and then in the 80s along comes AIDS, but I'd say really pretty much the 70s were the kind of the golden age for me. Also, I was young. I guess I was in my 30s, and for most of that, and when you're young, it's nice to be young. It's it's different when you're older. So I guess that's the best way I can describe it. It was a wonderful time, and particularly to be in San Francisco, to be in this kind of a gay environment. And and the synagogue likewise was involved in all that, and it was also a big influence as well. Just the idea of going to a gay synagogue, that was kind of a whole new innovation that I think started in the, oh gosh, I guess it started in the 70s probably, yeah, and We were not, I think we were the second or third synagogue, gay synagogue, behind New York and Los Angeles. And they started a couple years maybe before us. So that was a whole new thing, this whole idea, of being involved in a gay Jewish space. So
I
that
wanted
yeah,
to
yeah,
comment something, and then Trung has the next question that goes
yeah,
more into
please.
Shar Zahav. But I wanted to say I grew up staying in the summers that we'd go and stay at my aunt and uncle's in the Russian River at Oddfellows. And so I
Ah,
totally understand that, like, just the happiness and feeling in the community that's up there. It's like no other place that
yeah,
I
yeah.
can imagine it was extra special that there was a safe space for the gay community up there during that time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You have a sense that even as a kid, you had a sense of that, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. How old were you then in those days?
Oh gosh, I haven't been up there since high school probably, but
Okay.
we went
Yeah.
almost every summer my entire kind of childhood growing up, and so that
Yeah.
was always
Yeah.
always an adventure.
Yeah. 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 Thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
And then Trung, did you want to ask the next question?
Sure. So tell us the next question is going to be tell us about the way the sorry, I can't really I don't know how to pronounce it properly. Congregation
Yeah.
Sha'ar Zahav
Yeah.
responded to
Yeah.
the AIDS crisis.
How did it respond during the AIDS crisis? Is
Yeah.
that the question? Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, I talked a little bit about that already. Uh, how it was such a difficult time, how so many people were dying, and being a synagogue, being a religious organization, of course, we were involved in in the deaths because they were part of our community. Um, Up until then, we did not have a cemetery. Many synagogues, most synagogues have a cemetery for their members. But we were all 30 years old, so we weren't thinking about dying at that point. But when AIDS came along, um, we decided, gee, we really need a synagogue. We really need a cemetery for the synagogue because so many we're losing so many members. It would really be nice to have a place to come and where they would be to remember them. And so we set that up. That was one of the big things that came out of the AIDS epidemic. Uh, for our rabbi, who was Yoel Kahn at the time, a very difficult time. He used to talk about how hard it was and how depressing it was to be constantly putting on funerals and memorial services, and as the rabbi, nurturing people who were sick and caring for them and so on, just how wearing it was on him. And I think it, eventually was a lot of the reason that he eventually left the synagogue and he was with us for a long time. He was our first full-time rabbi, and that's when Rabbi Angel came. But in any event, no, I'm sorry, she came later. But anyway, uh, I think it just got to be overwhelming for him, and I think it got to be overwhelming for a lot of people. It just losing so many friends, and whereas before we'd been involved with what color should the banner be for Camp Sissy, now we were involved in caregiving and trying to support our friends who were sick and loss, when they died, etc. Um, I told you about my experience as a Shanti counselor, as an emotional support counselor, and I think I did it for about maybe 5 years, for about maybe 2 years, and I had about 5 clients that I worked with, and they all died. So everybody died. Nobody survived in those days. And after about 2 years, they came and the organization came into me and they said, okay, you're done. You can't do this anymore. It is too emotionally wearing. We don't let our volunteers continue for more than 2 years. So that's how it was. Uh, you know, as I said before in the previous question, if there's a silver lining to it all, it was that the community came together. The men and the women came together, uh, and worked together to, for a common cause, which was to, to try to do the best we could to survive this epidemic. And so that, it's a high price to pay for that, all the people that we lost. But that's it was. So, am I answering your question?
Yeah, Robert. So thank you so much for that question. My next question is exactly so regarding volunteerism, what did you do exactly and what did you do around it?
Regarding, I'm sorry, I didn't hear it. Regarding what?
Volunteering,
Oh,
volunteering.
volunteering.
Yeah.
With regards to what, to AIDS, HIV, or what? Or the synagogue, or
Mm-hmm.
what? Synagogue.
HIV. Yeah.
HIV/AIDS. Yeah, well, it's pretty much what I told you, what I've covered already. Uh, the Shanti was my major thing, but there were trying to think. I mean, there were other things that I did. I mean, I was always involved in the synagogue, and the synagogue was involved in a lot of caregiving, because it's a synagogue, and so I was involved in that. I was on the board of directors, for a couple of, well, a couple times, I guess, and later on, after Shanti said I was done, I started doing groups. I didn't work with individual clients, but they trained me to be a group leader. So then I continued on doing that, and I was a group leader actually for caregivers. So not for people with AIDS, but for the caregivers. And then I continued that at the synagogue and with a group of for people with HIV. And so I did those activities, led groups, learned how to facilitate. Uh, Trying to think what else. I mean, those are the main. The Shanti was the main thing. But beyond that, they're all. I mean, just supporting your friends, or I'll say just supporting my friends was a big thing. That was very all consuming. To people, friends of mine who died. Men I had dated, men from the synagogue, men that I knew, socially, whatever. Just so many people got sick and died, and hard to. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, it was how helpless we felt. Not being able to do anything. There wasn't even a treatment yet, and so that was very, very hard. Uh, Another aspect of that, uh, which didn't involve me directly, but it did involve the synagogue, and that was what became known as the San Francisco model of healthcare. In the beginnings, there was no information about HIV/AIDS, and there was no internet. So any information that came along had to be shared, one on one, or through the mails or whatever. And there was an organization specifically that sent out that whatever new information arose. But the San Francisco model of healthcare is based on the idea that the community takes care of itself. There was no money for research. There was no money for care. So the community had to come together and take care of itself, and that became the model of HIV care, certainly nationwide, maybe worldwide, and it also kind of influenced the whole way that patients relate to their doctors. where they're much more engaged, and they, you know, if the doctor says take these 2 pills and see me in 2 weeks, you don't just walk out of the office. You say, well, what are they for? You know, why are you prescribing this? You know, and oh, is there anything else I could do? And you know, you engage with the doctor, with the medical professional, and so that was kind of an extension of this idea of the community taking care of itself. And as I mentioned, there was no internet. So a wonderful example was that there was a drugstore in the Castro district, and anything that anybody found, any information that they found about HIV, people would post there. You print it out and post it. And there are pictures of a bunch of people, a bunch of guys standing in front of the windows there of the pharmacy looking at these postings. It was like the latest information that somebody found about HIV. So that was kind of the internet of the day, if you will. That was the way that information could get spread, and it wasn't as efficient as the internet, obviously. So to give you an example, there was a what was called an opportunistic infection, where you know HIV/AIDS, your immune system basically is destroyed. So all kinds of infections you can happen, which normally your immune system would hoard off, keep away. And one of the very common ones was called Kaposi sarcoma, was purple lesions that would form on the skin. Well, so any gay man who found any kind of a bruise on their body was, of course, immediately worried about it might be HIV/AIDS. So somebody posted on the window there at the pharmacy a picture of what the Kaposi's looked like, and then you could compare it to what you had on your own body. So that was the kind of thing, you know. Today you'd go on the internet and you'd see the picture immediately, and that would be it, but that wasn't available. So this kind of, you know, caring for each other, I think was a real theme in my life, and also, you know, and also in the synagogue life as well. Is that getting at what you're asking?
Yeah, that definitely kind of covered a lot of different places with volunteering, yourself and also just other members of the community.
Yeah.
And so we kind of wanted to know, like during this time period when, you know, you were doing a lot of this work that is very emotional and hard, and just living through that period where there's a lot of death and sadness, like what are some things that you did for self-care during this time, like physically or mentally, and you know, just in general, things that kept you healthy and got you through it?
Huh. I don't know. I think what I would say though is that up until then, I didn't really know much about the whole concept of self-care, and I think a lot of people didn't, you know, because they'd not been confronted with such a horrendous situation of caregiving, and one of the things that we learned in the Shanti training was the importance of self-care. And the way they put it was that if you don't care for yourself, you're going to get burned out, and then you're not going to be a very good caregiver for the person you're taking care of. So you need to take care of yourself. And I've repeated this to friends over the years many, many times, not just people taking care of people with AIDS, but people taking care of, you know, any kind of devastating situation where you know where a caregiver steps in. So you know this was always stressed, and they did all kinds of, the organization had all kinds of wonderful, you know, things for us as volunteers to help us take care of ourselves, parties and, you know, and information things and events and so on. And also we had a caregivers group. Like all the Shanti volunteers had to go to a I guess it was a bi-weekly group every other week, I think. I guess that's bi-monthly, I'm not sure. Anyway, beyond that, I don't know, you know, what I did to take care of myself. I mean, I tried to have fun. I tried to go on, you know, vacations and which I probably would have done anyway, as long as I could. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say about that. I think I've told you about the synagogue and the kinds of things that they were involved in with caregiving. Um, uh, the I, I think another silver lining of AIDS was the acceptance of the community of gay people and in the Jewish community of gay Jews. I think I told you last week that when I was a kid, I thought that I was the only Jewish person who was gay. I think I might have told you that. And so many people start out that way, think, I'm the only one, nobody else feels that way. And so then when I went to Shahar Zahav, and there were all these people who were gay, I thought, gee, here's a whole bunch of gay people. And then there were a whole bunch more, with the congregations all over the world. But the acceptance of other synagogues. Non-gay synagogues would be marching in the gay parade, and they still do, and the freedom in the gay pride parade. They have a huge contingent of other synagogues marching with us, and other synagogues set up caregiving groups for people with AIDS who are their members or just not necessarily their members. The Chicken Soupers was one group, where they always joke about chicken soup cures everything, all ails. And so there was a group called the Chicken Soupers who basically were caregivers, and they would make meals for people with AIDS. And this was from a non-gay synagogue did that. So those kinds of things were nice to see. And I think that did lead to after HIV/AIDS became more controllable and more of a disease that that you didn't necessarily die from, could be treated. After that, then I think some of that remained then as acceptance of gay folks, and I felt that in my life certainly. I felt more comfortable in those in those environments, in non-gay environments. So.
Thank you so much, Rob. We have one last question for you. So we just wanted to know if there were any rituals or, Jewish customs that helped you during that time. In
Hmm. Not specifically. Yeah, not specifically, but I think the community of the synagogue was very important. Just being with people, being with other people, and being with friends that you'd known for many years. That was comforting. There was a comfort in that. I mean, Judaism has a lot of wisdom in the rituals around death and dying. So some of those things were comforting, when we were in the midst of losing friends. But beyond that, I'm not sure there's much more that I could say about it. It doesn't. I mean, it was obviously it was what was going on with me in my life. So obviously it was an influence, and Judaism was my Judaism was part of that, and was a spiritual practice that helped me, through that. I guess
Was it possibly that maybe like attending the services at that time was kind of a form of self-care for you?
Yeah, I would say it was. Yeah, I would say it was because it was community, and but likewise, there were so many people dying all the time. That was sad. Every week you'd go to synagogue and there'd be an announcement of someone else who died. So that was hard. But but yeah, I mean, certainly the support of the synagogue was good. It was good to have a group of friends, a group of old friends, people I had known for so many years, to to support each other. So that was that was a factor. Um, but specifically to get at your question, about what in Judaism, um, I don't know. I'm kind of stumped on that one. I'm sorry. I guess if I thought about it, maybe I come up with some better information for you. But uh, but I think what I said is the gist of it. Just the idea that having the community, having friends, was important. Some of the rituals and the wisdom, as I call it, around death and dying in Judaism, um, around mourning, the importance of mourning, the importance of feeling the loss, and trying to work, be engaged in the loss, and then to come through it in a natural way, as opposed to just kind of ignoring it and trying to push it out of your life, to engage with it and to have the sadness, and to have the mourning, and to try to move through that, which is part of the Jewish way of mourning, where we formally mourn someone for a full year after they die, and so the what they call shloshim, which is the first 3 weeks, is the most intense period of mourning, and then going on for the year. So that's this idea of engaging with the loss is very important, and so that's a Jewish practice that was I think that was helpful to me through that time.
Thank you so much for all of your answers. I think we probably have a few minutes left before
Yeah, we do.
the
So,
breakout
yeah.
rooms end. I know I have one follow-up question. I'm sure other people probably do also, but
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, just in kind of the big picture, like what is something that living through all of those huge changes in different eras in your life, like what, and specifically maybe like that time of the AIDS crisis, like what was something that it taught you about, life or yourself or others, maybe how we deal with things or how people should be or things like that.
Yeah, gosh, that's such a big question. It's hard to put my thoughts together on it quickly. What can I tell you? Gosh, yeah, I'm not sure.
Or maybe, I guess, just maybe like one or two things that period taught you are like some of the most important things in life,
Yeah, I guess, yeah, if we simplify it down to that, that's maybe a little bit easier to answer. Uh, well, certainly friendship, the importance of friends, and what they call your family of origin and your family of choice. Your family of origin are your the family that you're related to, your parents, your cousins, and your uncles, and all that. The people that you are, yes, your actual family. And if you can put it one way, you could put it is the people that you're forced to be with, let's say on holidays or whatever. And then you have the family of choice, and your friends, and in the gay community, family of choice has always been very important, because a lot of gay people were kind of kicked out of their family of origin because they were gay. They were disowned, or they were told they were not welcome in the family. So they came to San Francisco and created a family of choice. And I have a family of choice, but I was fortunate to also have a family of origin. I don't have much of it left. I have a cousin and a sister left, but at the time when I was younger, we would get together, and I was comfortable being there as a gay man with my partner, and fortunately, that was fortunate. But I think the families of choice became so important during HIV/AIDS, because they were the support. They were your friends. They were the people that supported you. And when someone died, they were the people you could call up and cry with, or whatever, whatever it was. And that idea became very, very strong. And I don't think it was so strong in the general community as it is today. I think today it's kind of a common thing. We talk about our family of choice, but in those days, I think, pre-AIDS, it was there, but it wasn't maybe it wasn't as important to us. It became more important to us. So that was a good thing, and a way of coping that was important.
That's a great answer. Thank you for that answer. That's
Okay.
perfectly sums it up. And I don't
Hopefully
know,
that gets at it. Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Good.
I don't know if anyone else had any follow-up questions. If anyone wants to unmute and ask.
Here we have a minute or two. Who haven't we heard from? Beatrice, do you have anything? Did you have any follow-up questions for me? Okay.
It looks like we also have 10 more minutes, Rabbi Angel just announced. So
Ah,
if
okay.
anyone comes up with a question during this time,
Yeah.
and if there's
Okay.
anything else that you wanted to share with us about the questions from this week or last week, which again,
Yeah.
is just about your different identities,
Yeah.
or even any, stories just of things that you did throughout
Yeah.
your life.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mentioned to you about the prayer book being degenderized, and you all had, I think you were all over at services last week, or if not, you'll be at services this week, tomorrow, and I'm planning to be there tomorrow on Zoom, so I may see some of you, but the importance of that of the of the degenderized services, and how in our congregation, and this is a direct result of feminism, feminism being such a strong force in the gay community, is that as we came together as gay Jews, we of course brought this with us into the synagogue, and this idea of degenderizing the liturgy. And in the beginnings, I talked last week about how our early prayer books were cut and paste, was Xeroxed, cut and paste. And so in those prayer books, we would like take a prayer, Xerox it out of a prayer book, and then any place that said Lord or He, we would white it out, okay, and put in a new pronoun. So that was pretty funny, but to see. And of course, there were no computers. We didn't have any word processing. It was literally cut out, it was Xeroxed and cut and pasted into a new book. But anyway, but along with that was the idea of women and men being equal in the synagogue, being co-leaders. We almost always have a woman and a man on the pulpit together. Now, in traditional Judaism, the women are not allowed on the pulpit. They don't even sit with the men. They sit in a separate section. We talked about that last week. But in our synagogue, we have a lay, always if we have the rabbi on the pulpit, we also have a lay person. And many times we don't have the rabbi or the cantor on the pulpit, so service would be led by two lay people. Last week you saw the rabbi and a lay person. I'm not sure who is doing it tomorrow, but so some of the strongest service leaders are women. And in the beginning, we always would have like a man and a woman together, and sometimes now we just have two women or whatever, sometimes two men. But the point is that's very ingrained in our synagogue. It's very very much a part of what we do. And we try to alternate our president between, you know, a man 1 year, it's a 2 year term, a man and then a woman, and alternating. And we haven't had a transgender president yet, but we have a lot of transgender members, and I assume that we will eventually. The you know, embracing transgender is a whole nother extension of I think of feminism, if you will, and this idea of, you know, the inclusivity of gender. It's, you know, it's kind of the whole new frontier, you know, and it's kind of where all the political stuff is these days, and where there's a lot of in the American you know, states and laws in America, a lot of in some of the states, a lot of struggle around the transgender folks and not being accepted, etc. We have you know, bathrooms and all kinds of things that people fight about in some areas. So, but you know, Shar Zahav, we have had many transgender members over the years, and in fact, the first ever transgender rabbi was ordained from Shar Zahav. He started. Actually, it's a he now. Was a she, but she's a, you know, now a man. And Reuben Zellman went to Hebrew Union College and graduated and was ordained as the first transgender rabbi. So quite proud of that. So another.
I had another
minutes.
follow-up question.
Yeah.
You
yeah.
mentioned that during the HIV and AIDS time, the synagogue was involved with caregiving, and I was just wondering how that looked like and what else did they do? Like, was it groups of people they were managing, or like how did that work?
Yeah, there are all kinds of things. Um, trying to think of some of the examples. Well, it wasn't necessarily caregiving. I mean, there were informal groups of caregivers. I don't know if the synagogue had any formal caregiver groups, although we might have. Some synagogues did. Some other synagogues did. I mentioned the chicken soupers who, you know, made meals and delivered them to people who needed them. We you know, the whole caring for the caregiver was, I think, a big role of the synagogue. You know, because that was the place that people came for the care, where the caregivers came to be cared for, you know, to get strength to do what they were doing. I mentioned the role of the women, you know, and I think last week we talked about the blood drives, or maybe this week I guess it was, you know, that gay men couldn't give blood, so the women in the synagogue organized blood drives, and and the men would come and support the women who were giving blood, so that was kind of fun. So, you know, and we brought the donuts or whatever, you know, whatever they had. We published a cookbook called Out of Our Kitchen Closets, and all the proceeds from the cookbook went to HIV/AIDS care, and it received a lot of recognition. We sold a lot of copies of it, and it had reviews in the paper and in the newspaper and so on. And they were basically recipes from, you know, from the members, and in a beautifully designed book with illustrations, and one of our members wrote a kind of a history of the synagogue, like an oral history, interviewing different members up until that time, and about the origins of the synagogue and the growth of it. So we did a lot of fundraising. You know, that was something that as an organization you could do. And you know, and personal support, the rabbi counseling, and members, I think, just supporting each other. Again, the family of choice. It was, you know, the synagogue synagogue was our family of choice. These were the people that we chose to be with, and you know, and that supported us through this and understood what was happening, because it was happening to them too. So,
Thank you so
All right.
much for answering all of our questions and then
Thank
some.
you.
good
This was-
questions. It was good. It was a good
Yeah.
day. Thanks.
And we're gonna, I think, see you one more time for even more questions, but
I think we have one more, and then
yeah.
I'll see. Are some of you coming to synagogue tomorrow on Zoom?
Yes, I know, I
okay.
think a lot of the class came last week, but there's still gonna be some coming tonight or tomorrow.
Great. Good. And you can come twice if you want.
Yeah.
No charge. Okay.
Yeah, but thank you again
All right.
so much, and we'll
Nice to
see you
see
back
y'all.
in the main room.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Okay. Bye-bye.